Margaret Thompson was a 72-year-old widow living in the charming town of Ashland, Oregon. Nestled among the rolling hills and vibrant gardens, her little home was a reflection of her warm spirit. The walls were adorned with family photos, capturing moments of joy and laughter over the years. Margaret had always been the heart of her family, known for her delicious baked goods and her ability to bring everyone together. Her kitchen was her sanctuary, filled with the sweet aroma of cookies, pies, and cakes. Baking was not just a hobby for her, it was a way to express her love. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And be sure to subscribe for more powerful stories that honor the quiet strength within us all. Every Sunday, Margaret would whip up a batch of her famous chocolate chip cookies or her delightful lavender shortbread. Her grandchildren, Emma and Jake, would often come over, their faces lighting up at the sight of freshly baked treats. They would help her in the kitchen, laughing and sharing stories, creating memories that Margaret cherished deeply. Family was everything to her, and she took pride in being the glue that held them all together. As the sun began to set on a crisp autumn evening, Margaret felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Tonight was a family dinner at her daughter Claire's house. Claire, who was 48, had always been a bit of a perfectionist. She loved hosting gatherings, but Margaret often felt the pressure to impress. Claire had a way of making everything seem effortless, while Margaret sometimes struggled to keep up with her expectations. Margaret spent the afternoon preparing her contribution to the dinner, a beautiful tin filled with her lavender shortbread cookies. She carefully arranged them, making sure they looked perfect. As she placed the tin in her bag, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of nerves. What if Claire didn't like them? What if the dinner didn't go well? She shook off the thoughts, reminding herself that family was what mattered most. Arriving at Claire's house, Margaret was greeted with warm hugs and cheerful smiles. The dining room was beautifully set, with candles flickering and the scent of roasted chicken wafting through the air. Margaret felt her heart swell with love for her family. She joined the others at the table, sharing stories and laughter as they enjoyed the meal together. But as the evening progressed, Margaret noticed a shift in Claire's demeanor. Her daughter seemed tense, her smile a little too forced. Margaret brushed it off, thinking perhaps Claire was just stressed from hosting. After dinner, it was time for dessert. Margaret proudly presented her tin of cookies, eager to share her creation. "Mom, those look amazing," Claire said, her voice brightening for a moment. But as Margaret opened the tin, she noticed Claire's expression change. There was something in her eyes, an impatience, a flicker of something darker. As they all gathered around the table for dessert, Margaret felt a sense of pride. She had worked hard on those cookies, and she wanted everyone to enjoy them. But just as she reached for a cookie, Claire suddenly stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You've always been so selfish, Mom," Claire shouted, her voice echoing in the room. "You think everything revolves around you." Margaret's heart sank. She was taken aback, unable to comprehend what was happening. "What do you mean, Claire? I just wanted to share my cookies," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. In a shocking moment that felt like it was happening in slow motion, Claire grabbed the tin of cookies and hurled it at Margaret. The tin hit her square in the chest, the cookies scattering everywhere. Gasps filled the room as everyone froze, eyes wide in disbelief. Margaret stood there, stunned, crumbs falling from her cardigan, her mind racing to process the betrayal. The laughter and chatter that had filled the room moments before vanished, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Margaret felt a rush of emotions: hurt, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. How could her daughter do this? The shock of the moment left her speechless, and she could only stare at Claire, who was now breathing heavily, her anger palpable. Around the table, family members exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. Some looked at Margaret with sympathy, while others seemed to side with Claire, their expressions shifting to judgment. Margaret's heart ached as she realized that the very family she had devoted her life to was now witnessing this painful moment. As she brushed the crumbs from her blouse, Margaret felt a surge of anger rising within her. This wasn't just about the cookies. It was about years of sacrifice, love, and the unspoken expectations that had built up between them. In that moment, she knew she had to confront the truth of their relationship. But the shock of the incident left her feeling vulnerable and exposed. The evening had taken a turn she never expected. And as she looked around the table, Margaret realized that this was just the beginning of a much deeper conflict. The love she had always given so freely now felt overshadowed by Claire's entitlement and anger. The warmth of family had turned cold, and Margaret knew she had to find her voice amidst the chaos. Margaret sat in her living room, the remnants of the cookie incident still fresh in her mind. As she stared out the window at the vibrant autumn leaves, memories flooded back, taking her on a journey through her life. A life filled with love, sacrifice, and unfulfilled dreams. Margaret had grown up in a small town in Oregon, the youngest of 3 children. Her parents worked hard to make ends meet, instilling in her the values of hard work and dedication. From a young age, she learned the importance of family and the sacrifices that often came with it. She remembered her mother baking bread every Sunday, filling their home with warmth and comfort. It was in that kitchen that Margaret first discovered her love for baking. After high school, Margaret met Thomas, a kind-hearted man with a passion for gardening. They fell in love quickly, and soon after they married. Their life together was filled with laughter and shared dreams. Thomas supported Margaret's baking ambitions, encouraging her to open a small bakery. But life had other plans. When Claire was born, Margaret put her dreams on hold to focus on raising her daughter. As the years went by, Margaret dedicated herself to her family. She was always there for Claire, attending every school play, helping with homework, and cheering her on at soccer games. When Claire was a teenager, Margaret took on extra shifts at the local library to pay for her dance lessons and college applications. She wanted to give Claire every opportunity she could, even if it meant sacrificing her own desires. Margaret often thought about her bakery dreams, but they felt like distant stars, beautiful but unreachable. Instead, she poured her love into her family, believing that her sacrifices would lead to a brighter future for them all. Thomas, too, worked tirelessly, often taking on overtime to provide for their family. Together, they created a loving home, filled with warmth and laughter. As Claire grew older, Margaret noticed a shift in her daughter's attitude. Claire had always been the center of attention, and Margaret had encouraged that. But as she entered her 20s, Claire's sense of entitlement began to surface. She expected things to be handed to her without understanding the hard work that went into earning them. Margaret tried to instill values of gratitude and humility, but Claire often brushed them aside, believing she deserved more. When Claire graduated from college, Margaret felt a mix of pride and sadness. She had sacrificed so much for this moment, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Claire didn't fully appreciate it. Margaret had hoped that Claire would understand the value of hard work, but instead, she seemed to expect a life of ease. The years passed, and Margaret continued to support Claire, even as she started her own family. Claire married a man named David, and they had 2 children, Emma and Jake. Margaret adored her grandchildren and loved spending time with them, baking cookies and sharing stories. But she couldn't help but notice how Claire often relied on her for help, expecting Margaret to drop everything to cater to her needs. Margaret's heart ached as she reflected on the years of sacrifice. She had given everything to her family, yet it felt like her efforts were taken for granted. Claire's entitlement grew, and Margaret found herself feeling more like a servant than a mother. The love she had poured into her family now felt overshadowed by Claire's demands. The turning point came when Margaret finally decided to pursue her dream of opening a community garden. After Thomas passed away, she received a modest life insurance policy that allowed her to take a step toward her long-held dream. She had saved diligently, working part-time at the library, and finally had enough to buy a small plot of land. It was a chance for her to reclaim a piece of herself, to create something beautiful that she could call her own. But when Margaret shared her plans with Claire, she was met with resistance. Claire's reaction was swift and harsh. "Mom, you're too old for that. You should be thinking about retirement, not starting a new project," she had said, her tone dripping with condescension. Margaret felt her heart sink. This was her chance to finally do something for herself, yet Claire couldn't see beyond her own expectations. The tension between them grew, and Margaret began to feel like a stranger in her own family. Claire's entitlement had developed into a sense of ownership over Margaret's life, as if her mother's happiness was secondary to her own desires. Margaret often found herself questioning whether she had done the right thing by sacrificing so much for her daughter. As she sat in her living room, Margaret realized that the cookie incident was not just a moment of anger. It was the culmination of years of unspoken resentment and frustration. Claire's actions had forced Margaret to confront the reality of their relationship. She had spent a lifetime nurturing Claire, but now it was time to nurture herself. Margaret took a deep breath, feeling a sense of determination rising within her. She knew she had to stand up for herself, to reclaim her voice and her dreams. The love she had given so freely deserved to be reciprocated, and she was ready to demand the respect she had earned through years of sacrifice. As she prepared for the next family gathering, Margaret felt a shift within her. She was no longer just the devoted mother and grandmother. She was a woman with her own dreams and desires. The time had come for her to take a stand, to show Claire that she was more than just a caretaker. She was Margaret Thompson, a woman who had spent a lifetime sacrificing for her family, and it was time for her to bloom. The atmosphere in Claire's dining room was thick with tension after the cookie incident. Margaret stood frozen, her heart racing, as she processed what had just happened. The tin of cookies lay scattered on the floor, a symbol of the chaos that had erupted. She felt a mix of shock and confusion, unable to comprehend how her daughter could have acted so violently. Family members exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond. Some looked at Margaret with sympathy, while others seemed to side with Claire, their expressions shifting to judgment. Margaret's sister, Linda, was the first to break the silence. "Claire, that was uncalled for," she said, her voice steady but concerned. "You can't just throw things at your mother." Claire's face flushed with anger. "You don't understand. She's always been so selfish, always putting her needs first." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. Margaret felt her heart sink further. How had it come to this? She had always put her family first, yet here was Claire, accusing her of selfishness. Margaret's brother, Tom, chimed in, trying to diffuse the situation. "Let's all take a breath. This isn't helping anyone." But Claire wasn't having it. She crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "I'm tired of being the one who has to deal with her. She doesn't appreciate anything we do for her." Margaret felt a surge of anger rising within her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment to stand up for herself. "Claire, I've spent my entire life supporting you and your family. I've sacrificed my dreams for you, and this is how you repay me." Her voice trembled, but she held her ground, refusing to back down. Claire's eyes widened in disbelief. "You think you're the only one who's sacrificed? I've worked hard to provide for my family. You don't know what it's like to juggle everything." The tension in the room escalated, and Margaret could feel the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her. "Claire, I'm not saying you haven't worked hard," Margaret replied, her voice steadying, "but I've given up so much for you. I've always been there, supporting you. And now I'm finally trying to do something for myself. Why can't you see that?" Claire scoffed, her arms still crossed. "You think you can just waltz in and start a garden? At your age? You should be grateful we're even thinking about your future." The words stung, and Margaret felt a wave of hurt wash over her. How could Claire be so dismissive of her dreams? "Grateful," Margaret echoed, her voice rising. "I've spent decades being grateful for my family, for the life I built for you, but I'm not going to let you dictate my happiness anymore." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Margaret's heart raced as she continued. I deserve respect, Claire. I deserve to be recognized for everything I've done for this family. I'm not just your mother, I'm a person with my own dreams and desires. She could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This was her moment to reclaim her voice. Claire's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. You don't understand how hard it is for me, she said, her tone softening slightly. I'm just trying to help you. I thought you'd want to pass the nursery to Melissa. She needs it more than you do. Margaret shook her head, her heart aching. You don't get to decide what I need, Claire. I've worked hard for that nursery. It's my dream, and I'm not giving it away just because you think it's the right thing to do. The tension in the room was palpable, and Margaret could feel the eyes of her family on her, waiting to see how this would unfold. Claire's face flushed with anger again. You're being selfish. You're just going to let your pride get in the way of family? The accusation cut deep, and Margaret felt a mix of frustration and sadness. This wasn't just about the nursery. It was about years of unspoken resentment and hurt. Selfish, Margaret replied, her voice steady. I've spent my life putting everyone else's needs before my own. I've sacrificed my dreams for you, and now that I'm finally trying to do something for myself, you call me selfish? I'm done being the doormat in this family. The room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Margaret could see the shock on her family's faces, and for the first time, she felt a sense of empowerment. She had finally found her voice, and it felt liberating. Claire opened her mouth to respond, but Margaret cut her off. No, Claire, you need to listen. I love you, but I won't let you manipulate me anymore. I deserve to be happy, just like you. I'm not asking for much, just a little respect for the sacrifices I've made. Claire's expression softened, and for a moment, Margaret thought she might finally understand. But then Claire's defenses went back up. You're being dramatic, Mom. You always do this. You make everything about you. Margaret felt her heart sink again. This isn't about me, Claire. It's about finally standing up for myself. I've spent too long being quiet, letting you walk all over me. I'm not going to let that happen anymore. The tension in the room was thick, and Margaret could feel the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her. Some looked at her with sympathy, while others seemed to side with Claire, their expressions shifting to judgment. Mom, you're making a scene, Claire said, her voice rising. This isn't how we handle family issues. Margaret took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. Maybe it's time we handle things differently. I'm tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. I'm tired of being the one who always gives in. Claire's face twisted in anger. You're being unreasonable. You're just going to throw away everything we've built as a family. Margaret shook her head, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finally claiming what's mine. I want to build something for myself, and I hope you can understand that. The room fell silent again, the weight of Margaret's words hanging in the air. She could see the conflict in Claire's eyes, a mix of anger and confusion. Maybe you should think about what you're saying, Claire said, her voice quieter now. You're pushing everyone away. Margaret felt a pang of regret. I don't want to push anyone away, Claire. I just want to be heard. I want you to see me as more than just your mother. I'm a person with my own dreams. As the confrontation continued, Margaret felt a sense of clarity wash over her. This was her moment to reclaim her voice, to demand the respect she had earned through years of sacrifice. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was Margaret Thompson, a woman who had spent a lifetime nurturing her family, and it was time for her to bloom. The tension in the room was palpable, but Margaret stood her ground, ready to face whatever came next. She had finally found her voice, and she wasn't going to let it be silenced again. After the confrontation with Claire, Margaret felt a whirlwind of emotions. As she drove home, the cool evening air rushed through the open window, but it did little to calm the storm inside her. The words exchanged at the dinner table echoed in her mind, replaying like a broken record. She had finally stood up for herself, but the aftermath left her feeling both empowered and vulnerable. Once home, Margaret sank into her favorite armchair, the familiar fabric comforting against her skin. She looked around her living room, filled with memories of family gatherings, laughter, and love. But now it felt different. The warmth that once enveloped her was overshadowed by the weight of unspoken resentment. She realized that for too long, she had allowed herself to be treated as less than she was. Margaret took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs as she reflected on her life. She had spent decades nurturing her family, sacrificing her dreams for the sake of her children. But now, as she sat in the quiet of her home, she felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. It was time to reclaim her independence. "I am not a doormat," she whispered to herself, the words feeling powerful as they left her lips. "I deserve to be happy. I deserve to pursue my dreams." The realization washed over her like a wave, filling her with a sense of purpose. She had spent so long putting everyone else first that she had forgotten about her own desires. Margaret thought about the community garden she had always wanted to create. It was a dream she had nurtured for years, a vision of a vibrant space where people could come together, grow their own food, and connect with nature. After Thomas passed away, she had finally saved enough money to make it a reality, but she had hesitated, unsure if it was the right time. Now she felt a renewed sense of urgency. With a newfound determination, Margaret grabbed a notebook and began to jot down her ideas. She envisioned rows of colorful flowers, vegetable patches bursting with fresh produce, and a cozy seating area where people could gather and share stories. The garden would be a place of healing, a sanctuary for herself and others in the community. As she wrote, her excitement grew. She could see it all coming together in her mind. The laughter of children playing, the scent of herbs wafting through the air, and the joy of sharing the harvest with neighbors. This was her chance to create something beautiful, something that reflected her passion and dedication. The next morning, Margaret woke up early, the sun streaming through her kitchen window. She brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma filling the air, and sat down at the table with her notebook. Today was the day she would take the first steps toward making her dream a reality. After breakfast, she grabbed her jacket and headed out to the plot of land she had purchased. It was a small half-acre space on the outskirts of town, overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. But Margaret saw potential where others might see a mess. She could already envision the transformation that awaited. As she walked through the plot, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves created a soothing soundtrack, reminding her of the beauty of nature. She knelt down, running her fingers through the soil, feeling the earth beneath her nails. This was where she would plant her dreams. Margaret spent the day clearing the land, pulling up weeds, and envisioning where each flower and vegetable would go. It was hard work, but she felt invigorated. With every weed she pulled, she felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. This was her space, her sanctuary, and she was determined to make it thrive. As the sun began to set, Margaret took a step back to admire her progress. The plot was still a long way from being a garden, but she could see the potential. She felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. This was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Margaret dedicated herself to the garden. She researched different plants, learning about heirloom vegetables and native flowers. She spent hours at the local nursery, chatting with the staff and gathering supplies. Each trip filled her with excitement as she envisioned the vibrant colors and delicious produce that would soon fill her garden. Margaret also reached out to her neighbors, inviting them to join her in the project. She wanted the garden to be a community effort, a place where people could come together and share their love for gardening. To her surprise, many of them were eager to help. They brought seeds, tools, and their own ideas, turning the garden into a collaborative effort. As the garden began to take shape, Margaret felt a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. The laughter of children playing, the chatter of neighbors sharing stories, and the joy of planting seeds together filled her heart with warmth. This was what she had always wanted, a space where people could connect, grow, and thrive. One afternoon, as Margaret was planting tomatoes, she noticed Claire walking down the path toward the garden. Her heart raced, unsure of how their relationship would unfold. Would Claire be supportive, or would she dismiss Margaret's efforts again? "Mom," Claire called out, her voice hesitant. "Can I come in?" Margaret took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. "Of course, Claire. I'd love for you to see what I've been working on." As Claire stepped into the garden, her eyes widened in surprise. "Wow, Mom, this is amazing," she exclaimed, looking around at the vibrant plants and the organized rows. "I didn't know you were doing all this." Margaret felt a mix of pride and vulnerability. "I've been working hard. I wanted to create a space for the community, a place where we can all come together." Claire walked further into the garden, her expression softening. "I'm really impressed. This is beautiful." Margaret felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, Claire. I want you to be a part of it. This garden is for everyone, including you and the kids." Claire nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I'm sorry for how I acted the other night. I didn't mean to hurt you. I guess I was scared of losing you." Margaret's heart softened. "I understand, Claire, but I need you to understand that I'm not going anywhere. I'm just trying to find my own path." As they stood together in the garden, Margaret felt a sense of healing begin to take place. This was a new beginning for both of them, a chance to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of respect and understanding. With the garden flourishing, Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was a woman reclaiming her independence and creating a legacy for her family and community. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on. This was her time to bloom. A few days after Claire's visit to the garden, Margaret received a call that made her stomach twist with unease. Claire wanted to hold a family meeting. "Mom, I think it's time we all got together to talk things over," Claire said, her voice sounding almost too sweet. "I really want to clear the air and make sure we're all on the same page." Margaret hesitated. The last family gathering had ended in chaos, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face Claire again. But she also knew that avoiding the issue wouldn't help. "Okay, Claire, when do you want to meet?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Let's do it this Saturday at my house. I'll make dinner," Claire replied, her tone brightening. "It'll be nice to have everyone together again." Margaret agreed, but a knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that Claire's intentions weren't as innocent as they seemed. Still, she pushed those thoughts aside, reminding herself that she was stronger now. She had her garden, her community, and a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever Claire had planned, Margaret was determined to stand her ground. Saturday arrived, and Margaret prepared herself for the meeting. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant blouse and her favorite pair of slacks. As she looked in the mirror, she reminded herself that she was no longer the timid woman who had let others walk all over her. She was a woman with dreams and a voice, and she would not be silenced. When she arrived at Claire's house, the familiar scent of roasted chicken wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter from the children. Claire greeted her at the door with a warm smile, but Margaret could sense the tension beneath the surface. "I'm glad you could make it, Mom," Claire said, ushering her inside. The dining room was beautifully set, with candles flickering and a colorful salad waiting on the table. Margaret took a seat, and soon the rest of the family arrived. Claire's husband, David, and their two children, Emma and Jake. The atmosphere felt festive, but Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As they sat down to eat, Claire made small talk, but Margaret noticed her daughter's eyes darting around the table, as if she were gauging everyone's reactions. Margaret felt a sense of unease creeping in. Was this really about reconciliation, or was Claire planning something else? After dinner, Claire stood up, tapping her glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it," she began, her voice bright and cheerful. "I think it's important for us to talk about some things that have been on my mind." Margaret's heart raced. She could feel the tension in the room, and she braced herself for what was to come. "I know things have been a bit rocky between us, especially after the last family dinner," Claire continued, glancing at Margaret, "but I want us to move forward and support each other." Margaret nodded, trying to remain open-minded. "I agree, Claire. It's important for us to communicate." Claire smiled, but there was something calculating in her expression. "I've been thinking a lot about your garden project, Mom," she said, her tone shifting slightly. "And while I think it's great that you're pursuing your dreams, I really believe it's time for us to focus on what's best for the family." Margaret's heart sank. She could sense where this was heading. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Claire took a deep breath, her expression turning serious. "I think it would be best if you considered giving up the garden project. It's a lot of work, and you're not getting any younger. I believe Melissa would benefit more from that space. She's always wanted to run a garden center, and this could be her chance." Margaret felt a rush of anger and disbelief. "Claire, I've worked hard for that garden. It's my dream, and I'm not going to give it up just because you think it's better for someone else," she replied, her voice firm. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mom, you need to think about what's really important. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. It's time to let someone else take the reins. You should be grateful we're even considering this." Margaret's heart raced as she processed Claire's words. This wasn't about family. It was about control. "Grateful? I'm not going to be grateful for being asked to give up my dreams. I deserve to pursue what makes me happy," she said, her voice rising. The tension in the room escalated, and Margaret could feel the weight of her family's eyes on her. Emma and Jake exchanged worried glances, while David looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. "Claire, this isn't fair," David finally said, trying to intervene. "Your mom has worked hard for this. It's her dream." Claire shot him a look, her expression hardening. "I'm just trying to help her see the bigger picture. We all want what's best for the family, right?" Margaret felt a surge of frustration. "This isn't about what's best for the family. It's about what you want, Claire. You've always expected me to put everyone else first, but I'm done with that. I'm not giving up my garden." Claire's face flushed with anger. "You're being selfish. You think you can just do whatever you want without considering how it affects the rest of us?" Margaret stood her ground, her heart pounding. "I've spent my life considering everyone else's feelings. Now it's my turn to think about myself. I'm not going to let you manipulate me into giving up my dreams." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Margaret could see the shock on her family's faces, but she didn't care. She had finally found her voice, and she wasn't going to let it be silenced again. Claire crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "You're making a huge mistake, Mom. You're pushing us away." Margaret took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I'm not pushing anyone away. I'm simply standing up for myself. I love you, Claire, but I won't let you dictate my happiness anymore." Claire's expression softened for a moment, but then she quickly masked it with anger. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll see." Margaret felt a pang of sadness at her daughter's words, but she knew she had to stay strong. "I hope you can understand one day that this is about me finding my own path. I'm not going to regret pursuing my dreams." As the meeting came to an end, Margaret felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a sense of liberation. She had stood up for herself, and while the confrontation had been difficult, it had also been necessary. As she left Claire's house, Margaret felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She was no longer the woman who would let others dictate her life. She was Margaret Thompson, a woman with dreams, and she was ready to fight for them. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to see her garden flourish, no matter what it took. The days following the family meeting were a blur for Margaret. She felt a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside her, a storm that refused to settle. Claire's demands had pushed her to her breaking point, and the emotional toll was heavier than she had anticipated. Each time she thought about the conversation, her heart raced and her stomach twisted in knots. Margaret spent her mornings tending to her garden, but even the vibrant colors and fresh scents couldn't lift her spirits. She found herself pulling weeds with more force than necessary, her frustration spilling over into her work. The garden, which had once been a source of joy, now felt like a battleground, a place where she fought not just for her plants, but for her own sense of self-worth. One afternoon, as she pruned the rose bushes, Margaret's thoughts drifted back to Claire's words. "You're being selfish," echoed in her mind, a painful reminder of how her daughter viewed her. It was as if Claire believed that Margaret's happiness was secondary to her own desires. The realization hit hard. Claire's entitlement had grown unchecked, and it was time for Margaret to take a stand. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Margaret sat on her porch, a cup of tea in hand. The quiet of the neighborhood surrounded her, but her mind was anything but peaceful. She thought about the family property that Claire believed she deserved. It was a small house that had been in the family for generations, a place filled with memories of laughter and love. But now, it felt like a pawn in Claire's game of manipulation. Margaret's heart raced as she considered her options. She had always been the peacemaker, the one who avoided conflict at all costs. But now, she felt a fire igniting within her. She was tired of being pushed around, tired of being made to feel guilty for wanting to pursue her dreams. It was time to fight back. The next morning, Margaret made a decision. She would consult a lawyer about the family property. It was a bold move, one that felt both terrifying and liberating. She knew that taking legal action could create a rift in the family, but she also understood that she had to protect herself and her dreams. After doing some research, Margaret found a local attorney who specialized in family law. She scheduled an appointment, her heart pounding with anticipation. As she drove to the office, she felt a mix of fear and determination. This was a step into the unknown, but she was ready to reclaim her power. When she arrived at the law office, Margaret was greeted by a friendly receptionist who led her to a small conference room. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with legal texts, and the air smelled faintly of coffee. A few moments later, the attorney, a woman named Sarah, entered the room with a warm smile. "Hello, Margaret. It's nice to meet you," Sarah said, extending her hand. "What brings you in today?" Margaret took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her emotions. "I need to discuss some family matters," she began, her voice steady. "Specifically, I want to talk about the family property and my daughter's expectations regarding it." As Margaret shared her story, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. Sarah listened attentively, nodding, as Margaret recounted the recent family meeting and Claire's demands. "It sounds like you've been under a lot of pressure," Sarah said gently. "It's important to stand up for yourself, especially when it comes to your dreams." Margaret nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "I've worked hard for what I have, and I don't want to lose it because of my daughter's entitlement. I want to know what my options are." Sarah leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You have every right to protect your interests. If you feel that Claire is trying to manipulate you into giving up your property or your dreams, we can explore legal avenues to ensure that doesn't happen." Margaret felt a surge of determination. "I want to take legal action if necessary. I need to make it clear that I won't be pushed around anymore." Sarah smiled, her eyes sparkling with understanding. "That's a strong decision, Margaret. We can draft a letter outlining your position regarding the property and your intentions for the garden. It's important to set boundaries." As they discussed the details, Margaret felt a sense of empowerment growing within her. This was her chance to take control of her life, to stand up for what she believed in. She was no longer just a mother or a caretaker. She was a woman with her own dreams and aspirations. After the meeting, Margaret left the law office feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her independence, and it felt exhilarating. But as she drove home, a wave of doubt washed over her. Would this decision create a rift in her family? Would Claire retaliate? That evening, Margaret sat on her porch again, watching the sun set over the horizon. The colors painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, a beautiful reminder that change could be both frightening and beautiful. She thought about her garden, the vibrant flowers and vegetables that were beginning to flourish. This was her sanctuary, a place where she could grow and thrive. As the days passed, Margaret focused on her garden, pouring her energy into nurturing the plants. She found solace in the dirt beneath her nails and the sun on her face. Each time she pulled a weed or watered the flowers, she felt a sense of purpose. This was her space, her dream, and she was determined to protect it. But the tension with Claire lingered in the back of her mind. Margaret knew that she would have to confront her daughter again, and the thought made her stomach churn. She had taken a stand, but would Claire understand? Would she see the strength in Margaret's decision, or would it push them further apart? One afternoon, as Margaret was tending to her garden, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. It was Claire, walking down the path with a determined look on her face. Margaret's heart raced, unsure of what to expect. "Mom, can we talk?" Claire asked, her tone serious. Margaret took a deep breath, bracing herself for the conversation. "Sure, Claire, what's on your mind?" Claire stepped into the garden, her eyes scanning the vibrant flowers and vegetables. "I've been thinking about everything that happened at the meeting," she began, her voice softer than before. "I realize I may have overreacted." Margaret felt a flicker of hope. "I appreciate you saying that, Claire. I just want us to be able to communicate openly." Claire nodded, her expression earnest. "I know I've been demanding, and I'm sorry for that. I just want what's best for our family. But I also see how much this garden means to you." Margaret's heart softened. "It does mean a lot to me, Claire. It's my dream, and I want to share it with you and the kids." Claire took a step closer, her eyes searching Margaret's. "I want to support you, Mom. I really do. But I also want to make sure we're all on the same page. Can we find a way to work together?" Margaret felt a wave of relief wash over her. "I'd like that, Claire. I want us to be able to support each other, but I also need you to understand that I won't give up my dreams." Claire nodded, her expression sincere. "I get it. I really do. Let's figure this out together." As they stood in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature, Margaret felt a sense of hope blossoming. This was a turning point, a chance to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of respect and understanding. She was ready to fight for her dreams, but she also wanted to find a way to bring her family along for the journey. With the sun setting behind them, Margaret realized that she was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for a future where her family could thrive together. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it head-on, determined to create a legacy that would last for generations. Margaret felt a mix of determination and anxiety as she prepared for her next meeting with Sarah, the attorney. After their last conversation, she had spent hours thinking about her rights and the implications of taking legal action regarding the family property. It was a big step, but she knew it was necessary to protect her dreams and her independence. On the day of the meeting, Margaret arrived at the law office feeling a bit nervous. The familiar scent of coffee greeted her as she walked in, and the receptionist smiled warmly. "Good morning, Margaret. Sarah will be with you shortly," she said, gesturing toward the waiting area. Margaret took a seat, her heart racing. She couldn't help but think about how much had changed in such a short time. Just a few weeks ago, she had been a passive participant in her own life, allowing Claire to dictate her choices. Now she was ready to take control. When Sarah entered the room, she greeted Margaret with a friendly smile. "Hi, Margaret. It's great to see you again. How have things been since our last meeting?" Margaret took a deep breath, feeling a surge of confidence. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. I want to move forward with the legal action regarding the family property." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "That's a strong decision. Let's discuss your options and what the process will look like." As they talked, Sarah explained the legal framework surrounding property rights and inheritance. "You have every right to protect your interests, especially if you feel that Claire is trying to manipulate you into giving up what's yours," she said. "We can draft a formal letter outlining your position and intentions regarding the property." Margaret listened intently, absorbing every word. "What if Claire tries to fight back?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Sarah leaned forward, her tone reassuring. "It's possible that Claire may contest your claims, especially if she feels entitled to the property. But you have a strong case, especially given your long history of contributions to the family and your recent efforts to establish the garden." Margaret felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. "I'm ready to fight for what's mine," she declared, her voice steady. "I won't let anyone take away my dreams." As they finalized the details, Margaret felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She was taking control of her life, and it felt exhilarating. But as she left the office, a wave of doubt washed over her. Would this decision create a rift in her family? Would Claire retaliate? The following days were filled with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Margaret spent her time in the garden, pouring her energy into nurturing the plants. The garden had become her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the turmoil of family drama. But the thought of the impending legal battle loomed in the back of her mind. Then, one afternoon, the news broke. Margaret's sister, Linda, called her, her voice filled with concern. "Margaret, I just heard about the legal action you're taking. Is it true?" Margaret sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. "Yes, Linda. I'm trying to protect my interests regarding the family property." Linda paused, her tone shifting. "You know this could cause a lot of tension in the family, right? Claire is already upset." "I understand, but I can't let her dictate my life anymore," Margaret replied, her voice firm. "I've spent too long being pushed around." As the days passed, the news spread like wildfire. Family members began to reach out, some expressing their support for Margaret, while others sided with Claire. The rift in the family grew wider, and Margaret felt the emotional toll weighing heavily on her. At a family gathering a week later, Margaret could feel the tension in the air. Relatives whispered among themselves, casting glances in her direction. She tried to focus on the conversation, but the atmosphere felt charged with unspoken words. "Did you hear about Margaret?" one cousin said, her voice low. "She's taking legal action against Claire. Can you believe it?" Margaret's heart sank as she overheard the conversation. It felt like a betrayal, and she couldn't help but feel isolated. She had hoped for understanding, but instead, it seemed her decision had only fueled the fire. Later that evening, Claire approached her, her expression tense. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, her voice strained. Margaret nodded, bracing herself for the conversation. "Sure, Claire. What's on your mind?" "I've been hearing things," Claire said, her tone defensive. "People are taking sides, and it's causing a lot of drama in the family. You need to understand that this isn't just about you." Margaret felt a surge of frustration. "I'm not trying to create drama, Claire. I'm trying to protect myself. You've made it clear that you want me to give up my dreams, and I won't let that happen." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You're being selfish. You're tearing our family apart over a garden." Margaret took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "This isn't just about the garden. It's about my right to pursue my dreams and not be manipulated into giving them up. I deserve to be happy, just like you." Claire crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You're making a huge mistake, Mom. You're pushing everyone away." Margaret felt a pang of sadness. "I don't want to push anyone away, but I can't keep sacrificing my happiness for the sake of others. I've spent my life doing that, and it's time for a change." As the conversation continued, Margaret could see the anger and hurt in Claire's eyes. It was clear that her daughter didn't understand the depth of her feelings. The rift between them felt insurmountable, and Margaret realized that this battle would not only be legal, but emotional as well. The following weeks were filled with tension. Family members began to take sides, and Margaret felt increasingly isolated. Some relatives reached out to offer their support, while others expressed disappointment in her decision. "You're tearing the family apart, Margaret. one cousin said during a phone call. You need to think about the bigger picture. Margaret felt her heart ache at the thought of losing her family. But she also knew that she had to prioritize her own happiness. She had spent too long being the one to bend and accommodate everyone else's needs. Now it was her turn to stand firm. As the legal proceedings began, Margaret felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She met with Sarah regularly to discuss the next steps, and each meeting filled her with a sense of purpose. They drafted letters and prepared for potential negotiations, and Margaret felt empowered by the knowledge that she was taking control of her life. But the emotional toll was heavy. Margaret found herself questioning her decisions late at night, wondering if she was doing the right thing. Would this legal battle create a permanent rift in her family? Would she lose Claire forever? One evening, as she sat in her garden, surrounded by the vibrant colors of her flowers, Margaret took a deep breath. She reminded herself of the journey she had taken to get here. This garden was a symbol of her strength and resilience, a testament to her determination to reclaim her life. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the garden, Margaret felt a renewed sense of hope. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she was fighting not just for herself, but for the future she wanted to create. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As the legal battle loomed over Margaret, she found solace in her garden. It had become her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the turmoil of family drama and focus on nurturing her dreams. But she soon realized that she didn't have to face this challenge alone. The support of her friends and neighbors began to pour in, reminding her of the strength of community. One sunny Saturday morning, as Margaret was tending to her plants, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. It was Janet, her neighbor and longtime friend. "Margaret, I brought some tools and seeds. I thought I could help out today," she said, her smile brightening the day. Margaret felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thank you, Janet. I could really use the help. There's so much to do." As they worked side by side, more neighbors began to stop by, curious about the garden. Soon, a small group had gathered, each person eager to lend a hand. They brought shovels, seeds, and even homemade snacks to share. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and camaraderie, and Margaret felt her heart swell with appreciation. "Let's plant some tomatoes over here," one neighbor suggested, pointing to a sunny patch of soil. "And I brought some heirloom seeds that will do great in this area." Margaret watched as her friends dug into the earth, their hands working together to create something beautiful. It was a stark contrast to the tension she had felt with Claire. Here, in her garden, she was surrounded by people who believed in her and wanted to see her succeed. As the day went on, Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose. The garden was transforming before her eyes, and so was she. With every seed planted and every weed pulled, she felt a sense of empowerment growing within her. This was her dream, and she was no longer alone in pursuing it. By the end of the day, the garden was a vibrant tapestry of colors and textures. Margaret stood back, admiring the hard work they had all put in. "Thank you, everyone. This means so much to me," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without your support." Janet smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "We're all in this together, Margaret. You've always been there for us, and now it's our turn to help you." As the weeks passed, more and more people from the community joined in. They organized weekend work days, bringing tools, plants, and their enthusiasm. Margaret felt a sense of belonging that she hadn't experienced in a long time. The garden was not just a project, it was a symbol of resilience and unity. One afternoon, as Margaret was planting herbs, she noticed a group of children from the neighborhood gathering around. "Can we help too?" one little girl asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "Of course, I'd love your help," Margaret replied, smiling. She showed them how to plant seeds and care for the young plants. The children giggled and chatted as they worked, their laughter filling the air. It warmed Margaret's heart to see the next generation getting involved in something so meaningful. As the garden flourished, so did Margaret's spirit. She began to host small gatherings, inviting friends and neighbors to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They shared meals made from the fresh produce, and the garden became a hub of joy and connection. Margaret felt a sense of fulfillment that she had longed for, a feeling that she was making a difference in her community. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Margaret gathered her friends around a table set in the garden. "I just want to say how grateful I am for all of you," she began, her voice filled with emotion. "This garden has become a part of all of us, and I couldn't have done it without your support." Her friends smiled, their faces glowing in the warm light. "We're proud of you, Margaret," Janet said. "You've created something beautiful here, and it's inspiring to see how far you've come." Margaret felt tears prick at her eyes. "I've learned so much through this process. It's not just about the garden, it's about community, friendship, and finding my own strength." As they shared stories and laughter, Margaret realized that she had built more than just a garden. She had built a new life. The challenges she faced with Claire and the legal battle felt distant in this moment. She was surrounded by people who believed in her, and that made all the difference. The garden continued to thrive, and so did Margaret. She found joy in the simple act of nurturing the plants, watching them grow and flourish. Each day brought new challenges, but she faced them with a renewed sense of purpose. The garden had become a reflection of her journey, a testament to her resilience and strength. One afternoon, as Margaret was watering the plants, she noticed a familiar figure walking down the path. It was Claire, her expression uncertain. Margaret's heart raced, unsure of what to expect. Would this be another confrontation, or was Claire ready to reconcile? "Mom," Claire called out, her voice hesitant. "Can we talk?" Margaret took a deep breath, feeling a mix of emotions. "Sure, Claire, what's on your mind?" As Claire stepped into the garden, Margaret could see the tension in her daughter's shoulders. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," Claire said, her voice softening. "I realize I may have been too harsh." Margaret felt a flicker of hope. "I appreciate you saying that, Claire. I just want us to be able to communicate openly." Claire nodded, her eyes scanning the vibrant garden. "This place is beautiful, Mom. I can see how much it means to you." Margaret smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. "It really does. It's become a part of me, and I want to share it with you and the kids." As they stood together in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature, Margaret felt a sense of healing beginning to take place. This was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of respect and understanding. With the garden flourishing and the community rallying around her, Margaret realized that she was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for a future where her family could thrive together. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on, determined to create a legacy that would last for generations. The day of the family gathering arrived, and Margaret felt a mix of anxiety and determination. Claire had called for the meeting to discuss the ongoing legal issues surrounding the family property, and Margaret knew this would be a pivotal moment. She had spent weeks preparing herself for this confrontation, and she was ready to stand her ground. As she drove to Claire's house, Margaret's mind raced with thoughts of what might happen. Would Claire be defensive again? Would other family members take sides? She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the progress she had made in the garden and in her own life. This was about more than just the property. It was about her right to pursue her dreams and be respected as an individual. When she arrived, the atmosphere in Claire's home felt charged. Family members were already gathered, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. Margaret stepped inside, her heart pounding. She greeted her relatives with a nod, but she could feel the tension in the air. Everyone was waiting to see how this would unfold. Claire stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed, looking both anxious and defiant. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady but strained. "I know this is a difficult situation, but we need to talk about the legal action Margaret is taking." Margaret felt a surge of determination. This was her moment to speak up, to share her side of the story. I appreciate everyone being here, she said, her voice calm but firm. I want to clarify why I felt the need to take legal action. It's not just about the property, it's about my right to pursue my dreams without feeling pressured to give them up. Claire's expression hardened. You're making this about you again, Mom. This is about the family and what's best for all of us. Margaret shook her head, feeling frustration bubbling up. No, Claire. This is about me finally standing up for myself. I've spent my life putting everyone else's needs before my own, and I won't do that anymore. The room fell silent, the weight of Margaret's words hanging in the air. She could see the surprise on her family members' faces, but she pressed on. I love this family, but I also need to love myself. The garden is my dream, and I won't let anyone take that away from me. Claire's eyes narrowed, and Margaret could see the anger building within her. You're being selfish, Mom. You're tearing this family apart over a garden. Margaret felt her heart race. It's not just a garden, Claire. It's a symbol of my independence, my strength. I've worked hard to create something beautiful, and I won't let you dismiss it. Claire stepped closer, her voice rising. You think you can just do whatever you want without considering how it affects the rest of us. You're being unreasonable. Margaret took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm finally taking control of my life. You've always expected me to cater to your needs, but I'm done being the doormat. The tension in the room escalated, and Margaret could feel the eyes of her family members on her, waiting to see how this would unfold. Some looked at her with sympathy, while others seemed to side with Claire, their expressions shifting to judgment. Mom, you're pushing everyone away, Claire said, her voice trembling with anger. You're making a huge mistake. Margaret felt a pang of sadness at her daughter's words. I don't want to push anyone away, Claire. I just want to be heard. I want you to see me as more than just your mother. I'm a person with my own dreams. Claire's expression softened for a moment, but then she quickly masked it with anger. You're being dramatic. You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be. Margaret shook her head, feeling tears prick at her eyes. I'm not being dramatic. I'm standing up for myself for the first time in my life. I've spent too long being quiet, letting you walk all over me. I won't let that happen anymore. The room was silent, the weight of Margaret's words hanging in the air. She could see the shock on her family's faces, and for the first time she felt a sense of empowerment. She had finally found her voice, and it felt liberating. Claire opened her mouth to respond, but Margaret cut her off. No, Claire, you need to listen. I love you, but I won't let you manipulate me anymore. I deserve respect, just like you. Claire's face flushed with anger again. You're being selfish. You're tearing this family apart over a garden. Margaret felt her heart ache at the accusation. This isn't about the garden, Claire. It's about years of feeling undervalued and unappreciated. I've sacrificed so much for this family, and now it's time for me to pursue my own happiness. Claire's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. You don't understand how hard it is for me, she said, her voice softening slightly. I'm just trying to help you. Margaret took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I appreciate that you want to help, but I need to make my own choices. I'm not asking for permission. I'm claiming what's rightfully mine. The tension in the room was palpable, and Margaret could feel the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her. Some relatives began to whisper among themselves, and Margaret could sense the divide growing wider. Mom, you're being unreasonable, Claire said, her voice rising again. You're pushing us all away with this attitude. Margaret felt a surge of frustration. I'm not pushing anyone away. I'm simply standing up for myself. I've spent too long putting everyone else's needs before my own. I deserve to be happy, just like you. Claire's eyes narrowed, and Margaret could see the anger boiling beneath the surface. You're making a huge mistake, Mom. You're going to regret this. Margaret shook her head, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. I won't regret standing up for myself. I've spent too long being the one who sacrifices everything. It's time for me to take control of my life. As the confrontation continued, Margaret felt a sense of clarity wash over her. This was her moment to reclaim her voice, to demand the respect she had earned through years of sacrifice. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was Margaret Thompson, a woman who had spent a lifetime nurturing her family, and it was time for her to bloom. The room fell silent, and Margaret could see the shock on her family's faces. Some looked at her with sympathy, while others seemed to side with Claire, their expressions shifting to judgment. But Margaret didn't care. She had finally found her voice, and she wasn't going to let it be silenced again. "Mom, please," Claire said, her voice trembling. "You're tearing us apart. We're family." Margaret felt a pang of sadness at her daughter's words, but she knew she had to stay strong. "I love you, Claire, but I can't keep sacrificing my happiness for the sake of others. I've spent my life doing that, and it's time for a change." As the confrontation reached its peak, Margaret felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She had finally stood up for herself, and while the confrontation had been difficult, it had also been necessary. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on, determined to create a legacy that would last for generations. The confrontation had left Margaret feeling both drained and relieved. As she drove home from Claire's house, her mind raced with thoughts of what had just happened. The emotional weight of the evening hung heavy in the air, but deep down, she felt a flicker of hope. She had finally stood up for herself, and that was a significant step forward. The following days were filled with a mix of tension and reflection. Margaret spent time in her garden, nurturing the plants that had become her sanctuary. Each flower she tended reminded her of the strength she had found within herself. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to change between her and Claire. Then, one afternoon, as Margaret was pruning the roses, she heard a soft voice behind her. "Mom?" It was Claire, her tone hesitant. Margaret turned, her heart racing. "Claire, what are you doing here?" she asked, trying to keep her emotions in check. "I wanted to talk," Claire said, stepping into the garden. Her eyes were downcast, and Margaret could see the tension in her shoulders. "Can we sit?" Margaret nodded, leading Claire to a bench nestled among the flowers. The garden was in full bloom, vibrant colors surrounding them, but the atmosphere felt heavy. "What's on your mind?" Margaret asked, her voice steady. Claire took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I realize I've been selfish. I've been so focused on what I want that I didn't consider your feelings." Margaret felt a rush of emotions, surprise, relief, and a glimmer of hope. "I appreciate you saying that, Claire. It means a lot to me. I'm sorry for how I treated you," Claire continued, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared of losing you and the family we built. I thought if I pushed you to give up the garden, it would keep us all together." Margaret's heart softened at her daughter's vulnerability. "I understand, Claire. Change is hard, and I know you were trying to protect what you thought was best for the family. But I need you to understand that I have dreams too." Claire nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I see that now. I've been so focused on my own fears that I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I'm really sorry, Mom." Margaret felt a wave of emotion wash over her. "Thank you, Claire. I appreciate your apology. It takes a lot of courage to admit when we're wrong." As they sat together in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature, Margaret felt a sense of healing beginning to take place. This was a turning point, a chance to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of respect and understanding. "I want to support you in your garden," Claire said, her voice steadying. "I see how much it means to you, and I want to be a part of it. Can we work together?" Margaret smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. "I would love that, Claire. This garden is for all of us, and I want you and the kids to be involved. It can be a place where we all come together." Claire's face lit up with a smile, and for the first time in a long while, Margaret felt a sense of hope for their relationship. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about the garden, brainstorming ideas for new plants and projects. It felt good to reconnect, to share their dreams and visions for the future. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Margaret realized that this was just the beginning of their healing journey. They had a long way to go, but the willingness to communicate and understand each other was a significant step forward. In the days that followed, Claire became a regular presence in the garden. She brought her children, Emma and Jake, who were eager to help. Together they planted new flowers, tended to the vegetables, and shared laughter as they worked side by side. The garden transformed into a vibrant space filled with love and connection. Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose as she watched her family come together. The garden was no longer just a project. It was a symbol of their resilience and strength as a family. Each day brought new challenges, but Margaret faced them with a sense of hope and determination. One evening, as they gathered around a table set in the garden, Margaret looked at her family with gratitude. "I just want to say how thankful I am for all of you," she began, her voice filled with emotion. "This garden has become a part of all of us, and I couldn't have done it without your support." Claire smiled, her eyes shining. "We're proud of you, Mom. You've created something beautiful here, and it's inspiring to see how far you've come." Margaret felt tears prick at her eyes. "I've learned so much through this process. It's not just about the garden. It's about family, friendship, and finding my own strength." As they shared stories and laughter, Margaret realized that they were building a new foundation for their relationship, one based on mutual respect and understanding. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on, determined to create a legacy that would last for generations. In the weeks that followed, Margaret and Claire continued to work together in the garden, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They learned to communicate openly, sharing their thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. The healing process was gradual, but it felt genuine. One afternoon, as they planted a new row of sunflowers, Claire turned to Margaret with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, I've been thinking about how we can involve the community even more. What if we host a garden party to celebrate everything we've accomplished?" Margaret's heart swelled with excitement. "That's a wonderful idea, Claire. We could invite everyone who helped us, and it would be a great way to bring the community together." As they planned the event, Margaret felt a sense of joy bubbling within her. This garden had become a symbol of healing, not just for her, but for her entire family. It was a place where they could come together, share their dreams, and support one another. The day of the garden party arrived, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter and excitement. Neighbors and friends gathered to celebrate the fruits of their labor, and Margaret felt a sense of pride as she looked around at the vibrant garden. It was a testament to their hard work and resilience. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Margaret took a moment to reflect on how far she had come. She had faced challenges, fought for her dreams, and rebuilt her relationship with Claire. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. In that moment, surrounded by family and friends, Margaret realized that healing was possible. With love, understanding, and a willingness to communicate, they could overcome any obstacle. The garden was not just a place of growth, it was a symbol of their journey. A journey of forgiveness, resilience, and the power of family. As the evening came to a close, Margaret felt a sense of hope for the future. She was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that she had the support of her family and community. Together, they would continue to nurture their dreams and create a legacy that would last for generations. As the garden party came to a close, Margaret stood back and took a moment to soak it all in. The laughter of friends and family filled the air, mingling with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. She watched as Claire chatted with neighbors, her face lit up with joy. It was a stark contrast to the tension that had once defined their relationship. Margaret felt a warmth in her heart, knowing that they had come so far together. Reflecting on her journey, Margaret realized just how much she had transformed. Not long ago, she had been a woman who felt invisible, constantly sacrificing her own dreams for the sake of others. But now she was a stronger, more assertive woman who had learned to stand up for herself. The garden had become a symbol of her growth, a place where she had nurtured not only plants, but also her own spirit. Margaret remembered the days when she had hesitated to voice her opinions, afraid of conflict and rejection. Now she felt empowered to express her thoughts and desires. The confrontation with Claire had been a turning point, forcing her to confront the deep-seated emotions that had been buried for too long. It had been difficult, but it had also been necessary for her healing. As she walked through the garden, Margaret admired the vibrant colors and the fruits of their labor. The tomatoes were ripening, the sunflowers stood tall, and the herbs filled the air with their fragrant aroma. Each plant represented a piece of her journey, a testament to her resilience and determination. She had created something beautiful, and it was a reflection of her newfound strength. Margaret's friends and neighbors had rallied around her, offering support and encouragement. They had become her community, a network of people who believed in her and her dreams. She felt grateful for their presence in her life, knowing that she was no longer alone in her journey. Together, they had built a garden that was not just a project, but a sanctuary for everyone involved. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Margaret gathered her family and friends for a toast. "I just want to say how thankful I am for all of you," she began, her voice filled with emotion. "This garden has become a part of all of us, and I couldn't have done it without your support. You've helped me realize that it's never too late to pursue my dreams." Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Margaret felt a surge of joy. She had created a space where people could come together, share their stories, and support one another. It was a beautiful reminder of the power of community and the importance of nurturing relationships. As the evening wore on, Margaret found herself reflecting on the future. She had learned to embrace her independence, and she was excited about what lay ahead. The garden was just the beginning. It was a stepping stone toward a life filled with purpose and fulfillment. Margaret envisioned hosting more community events, workshops, and gardening classes. She wanted to share her knowledge and passion with others, helping them discover the joy of gardening and the importance of nurturing their own dreams. The thought filled her with excitement, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. In the weeks that followed, Margaret began to put her plans into action. She organized gardening workshops for children and adults, teaching them about planting, caring for plants, and the benefits of growing their own food. The response was overwhelming, and the garden became a hub of activity, filled with laughter and learning. As she worked with the community, Margaret felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She was no longer just nurturing her own dreams. She was helping others realize theirs. The garden had become a place of growth, not just for plants, but for people. It was a space where friendships blossomed and connections were forged. One afternoon, as Margaret was teaching a group of children how to plant seeds, she noticed Claire watching from a distance. Her heart raced, unsure of how her daughter would react to the growing community around the garden. But as Claire approached, she wore a smile. "Mom, this is amazing," Claire exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "I can't believe how many people are getting involved. You've created something really special here." Margaret felt a wave of warmth wash over her. "Thank you, Claire. It means a lot to have your support. I want this garden to be a place where everyone can come together." Claire nodded, her expression sincere. "I've been thinking about how I can help more. I'd love to get involved with the workshops and bring the kids." Margaret's heart swelled with hope. "I would love that. The more, the merrier. This garden is for all of us, and I want you and the kids to be a part of it." As they stood together in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature, Margaret felt a sense of healing beginning to take place. This was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of respect and understanding. With each passing day, Margaret embraced her independence and the support of her community. She had transformed from a woman who felt invisible to a vibrant force of nature, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The garden was not just a project, it was a symbol of her journey, a testament to her resilience, strength, and the power of community. As the seasons changed, so did Margaret's life. She looked forward to the future with optimism, knowing that she had the support of her family and friends. Together, they would continue to nurture their dreams and create a legacy that would last for generations. In the quiet moments spent in her garden, Margaret found peace. She had learned that it was never too late to bloom, to embrace her dreams, and to stand up for herself. With each flower that blossomed and each vegetable that ripened, she felt a sense of fulfillment that she had longed for. This was her new chapter, and she was ready to write it with love, strength, and hope. As Margaret stood in her garden, surrounded by the vibrant colors of blooming flowers and the rich scent of fresh herbs, she felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. The journey she had taken over the past few months had been transformative, and she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. Not long ago, she had felt lost, overshadowed by the expectations of others, and unsure of her own worth. But now, as she looked around at the thriving garden, a symbol of her resilience and determination, she realized that she had finally found her voice. Margaret thought back to the moments of doubt and fear, the times when she had allowed Claire's demands to dictate her happiness. She remembered the confrontation that had pushed her to her breaking point, forcing her to confront the deep-seated emotions that had been buried for too long. It had been a painful process, but it had also been necessary for her growth. Through it all, Margaret had learned the importance of standing up for herself. She had discovered that self-worth was not something to be given or taken away. It was something to be claimed. She had spent years nurturing her family, but now she understood that she also needed to nurture her own dreams and desires. The support of her friends and neighbors had been invaluable. They had rallied around her, reminding her that she was not alone in her journey. Together, they had created a community that thrived on love, respect, and shared dreams. Margaret felt a sense of belonging that she had longed for, and it filled her heart with joy. As she tended to her plants, Margaret thought about the lessons she wanted to share with others. She wanted women everywhere to know that it was never too late to pursue their dreams, to stand up for themselves, and to embrace their own worth. The journey might be difficult, but the rewards were immeasurable. Margaret envisioned hosting workshops not just about gardening, but about empowerment and self-discovery. She wanted to create a space where women could come together, share their stories, and support one another in their journeys. The garden had become a sanctuary, and she wanted to extend that sense of safety and encouragement to others. With each passing day, Margaret felt more confident in her ability to inspire change. She had transformed from a woman who felt invisible to a vibrant force of nature, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The garden was not just a project, it was a testament to her journey, a symbol of her strength and resilience. As she stood in the garden, watching the sun set and casting a warm glow over the flowers, Margaret felt a sense of peace. She had learned that self-worth was not just about achieving dreams. It was about recognizing one's own value and embracing it fully. In that moment, she made a promise to herself. She would continue to nurture her dreams, support her community, and empower others to find their own voices. She would be a beacon of hope for those who felt lost, reminding them that they too could bloom. Remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Your dreams matter, and you deserve to pursue them. Embrace your self-worth, and don't be afraid to find your voice. You are stronger than you think. And together, we can create a world where everyone feels valued and empowered. If you've enjoyed Margaret's journey and found inspiration in her story, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your support means the world. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate resilience, empowerment, and the strength of women. Together, we can continue to uplift and inspire one another. Thank you for being a part of this journey.